At 2:13 in the morning, I woke up convinced my apartment was on fire. The smoke alarm screamed above me. Smoke covered the ceiling. Something smelled horribly burnt. For one terrifying second I couldn't move. Then I remembered the garlic bread. Oh no. I jumped out of bed, nearly tripped over a pair of shoes and ran into the kitchen. A black cloud was pouring out of my oven. I grabbed the tray with a towel, dropped it into the sink, and immediately regretted opening the oven because the smoke became even thicker. The alarm screamed louder. Then someone started pounding on my front door. Fire department. Open the door. I froze. There was something humiliating about having an actual firefighter show up because I'd managed to nearly destroy my apartment with frozen garlic bread. I opened the door and forgot how to breathe. He stood in the hallway wearing a dark fire department uniform, heavy boots, and a jacket hanging open over a fitted shirt. He was tall, much taller than me, with broad shoulders and the kind of solid build that made him look as though he belonged in a completely different world. His hair was dark with noticeable streaks of gray at the temples. His face was mature, sharp, and calm. And his eyes, I don't know what it was about them. They were steady, warm, almost amused. He looked at me. Then he looked past me at the smoke. Then back at me. How bad? I swallowed. Depends. On what? Whether you're asking about the kitchen or my dignity. For half a second he simply stared. Then one corner of his mouth lifted. Kitchen first. I stepped aside. He walked in. I followed him, feeling ridiculous and strangely aware of every movement he made. He checked the oven, opened the windows, switched off the smoke alarm, and made sure there was no actual fire hiding behind the cabinets. After a few minutes, the apartment finally began clearing. He glanced toward the sink. Garlic bread. I nodded. Frozen? Another nod. He looked at me. How long did you leave it in there? I hesitated. 45 minutes. His eyebrows rose. 45. I was asleep. Clearly. I laughed despite myself. He picked up the ruined tray and shook his head. You know, most people use a timer. I usually do. Usually? I was tired. He looked at me again and this time his smile lasted a second longer. I'm Roman. Eli. Well, Eli, your apartment is going to survive. I didn't realize until then how tense I'd been. My shoulders dropped. So I'm not going to die? Not tonight. He started toward the door. Something about the thought of him leaving made me speak before I could stop myself. Roman? He turned. Yeah. Thank you. His expression softened. You're welcome. Then he gave me one final look before stepping into the hallway. I closed the door, leaned against it, and stared at the floor. What was wrong with me? He was a firefighter. He was clearly older than me, and judging from the gray in his hair, probably a lot older. I was 25. He had to be 45? Maybe 50? That should have been the end of it. Except it wasn't. For the next 3 weeks I kept thinking about him. I told myself it was because he'd saved my apartment. Then I admitted it was because his voice had stayed in my head. Then I stopped lying to myself. I was attracted to him. I had no idea what to do with that realization. So I did nothing. Life continued. Until 3 weeks later when I volunteered at a neighborhood fundraising event. I'd barely stepped inside when I heard someone laugh behind me. A low, familiar laugh. My stomach dropped. I turned. Roman was standing across the room. No uniform this time. Just dark jeans, a fitted black shirt, and a jacket pushed back over his shoulders. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then his eyes found mine. Recognition appeared immediately. His lips curved. He walked over. I know you. I smiled nervously. Unfortunately. He chuckled. The garlic bread survived? Physically, no. He laughed again. And somehow, in the middle of a crowded room filled with people, it suddenly felt like we were standing alone. Roman folded his arms. So what brings you here? I volunteer sometimes. Good. Good? He nodded. Means I get to see whether you've learned how an oven works. I laughed. And that was the moment I realized something dangerous. The firefighter who had walked into my apartment that night wasn't leaving my life as quickly as I'd hoped. Because standing there across from him, I wanted to know everything about him. And I had a feeling he wanted to know something about me too. I tried not to look at Roman. That lasted approximately 4 minutes. The fundraiser was crowded, noisy, and warm. People moved between tables carrying plates of food, volunteers rushed around with boxes, and someone near the stage was testing a microphone that produced an unbearable screech every 30 seconds. But somehow, every few moments I found myself searching for Roman. He was near the far side of the room, speaking with two firefighters. Even without his uniform, there was something unmistakably commanding about him. He didn't need to be loud. People simply listened when he spoke. I watched him laugh at something one of his coworkers said. Then he turned. Our eyes met. I immediately looked away. My cheeks burned. Smooth Eli. I muttered it under my breath. You talking to yourself? I nearly jumped. Roman was standing beside me. I turned toward him. Apparently. He smiled. That's usually a sign of a healthy social life. I laughed. You're enjoying this? Maybe a little. He reached for a paper cup on the table and took a sip. How have you been? Good. No more kitchen fires? Not since the garlic bread incident. That's progress. I looked at him. He looked genuinely pleased. Not amused this time. Pleased. For some reason, that tiny change in his expression made my chest tighten. A volunteer called Roman from across the room. He glanced toward them. I have to help with something. I nodded. Of course. He took 2 steps away, then stopped. Can I get your number? I stared at him. My number? For the volunteer schedule. I knew exactly what he was doing. Or at least I hoped I did. Sure. I gave him my phone. He entered his number, called himself, and handed the phone back. His contact appeared on the screen. Roman Hayes. No heart. No unnecessary emoji. Just Roman Hayes. Still, my pulse was racing. Text me, he said. When? Whenever. Then he walked away. I stared at the screen. The man was 50. I had learned that later that evening after searching the fire department website. 50. Exactly 50. The number stopped me. I was 25. Half his age. He had been an adult before I had even been born. He had already built a life, a career, a family, a marriage, and I'd been impressed because he knew how not to burn garlic bread. This was ridiculous. So naturally I texted him that night. Thanks for the warning about the oven. His response came almost immediately. You're welcome. Try not to burn dinner tomorrow. Asterisk asterisk. I smiled. Then another message appeared. Although I'm beginning to think I should inspect your kitchen personally. I stared at it. My heart jumped. Then another message arrived. That sounded less professional than intended. I laughed out loud. For the next several weeks we kept talking. At first it was innocent. Random messages. Jokes. Stories about work. Then somehow our conversations became longer. He would text me during breaks. I'd send him pictures of ridiculous things I saw during the day. Sometimes he'd call. Those calls became my favorite part of the evening. Roman had a way of making silence comfortable. I didn't have to perform around him. I didn't have to fill every pause. One night we talked for almost 2 hours. I was lying on my bed with the lights off, staring at the ceiling while listening to his voice through my phone. He told me about his first year as a firefighter. How he'd been terrified the first time he entered a burning building. How he'd learned that bravery wasn't the absence of fear. It was moving anyway. What about you? He asked. What about me? Why do you always change the subject whenever we talk about your future? I smiled. You notice everything? Occupational hazard. I sighed. I don't know what I want. You don't have to. Easy for you to say. You've lived half your life already. There was silence. I regretted the words immediately. I didn't mean. I know. His voice had changed. Quieter. You're right about one thing. What? I've lived a lot of life. I waited. He continued. Marriage. Divorce. Raising my daughter. Years at the firehouse. More mistakes than I care to admit. And you're okay with all that? Some days. I smiled. That's honest. I try. There was another pause. Then Roman said something that stayed with me. Life doesn't become easier because you've lived longer, Eli. Then what does? You get better at recognizing what's worth fighting for. My throat tightened. I didn't know what to say. So I changed the subject. Again. But this time Roman didn't let me hide. A few days later we met for coffee. It was supposed to be an hour. It became 3. We talked about movies, music, childhood memories, terrible bosses, embarrassing first dates, and the weirdest calls he'd ever responded to. Eventually the conversation became personal. Have you ever dated someone older? He asked. I looked at him over my coffee. Not 25 years older. His eyes stayed on mine. That's not what I asked. I smiled nervously. No. He nodded. Why? Because I never thought about it. And now? I looked down. Now I think about it too much. Roman didn't smile. He simply watched me. The air between us suddenly felt different. I'm 50, Eli. I know. You're 25. I know that too. That's a big difference. I know. He leaned back slightly. Then you understand why I'm cautious. I nodded. Are you saying you're not interested? He didn't answer immediately. His eyes lowered to my hand resting on the table, then back to my face. No. One word. Quiet. Certain. My heartbeat became unbearable. No. Roman shook his head. No. He reached across the table. His fingers stopped just beside mine. Not touching. Giving me a choice. I moved my hand the final inch. Our fingers met. His hand was warm. Rough. Steady. He looked down at our hands. Then at me. Neither of us pulled away. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. And I knew the line between friendship and something else had just disappeared. The terrifying part wasn't the age gap. It wasn't his history. It wasn't even the possibility that this might end badly. The terrifying part was how right his hand felt against mine. And when Roman finally squeezed my fingers gently, I realized something I wasn't ready to admit yet. I wasn't just attracted to him anymore. I was falling for him. Falling for Roman was easy. Accepting what that meant was not. After that coffee, everything between us changed. Not dramatically. There was no sudden confession. No announcement. No moment where we decided we were officially something. It happened quietly. Roman started calling me in the evenings just to hear my voice. I started saving little stories from my day because I knew I wanted to tell him later. We found excuses to see each other. Coffee became dinner. Dinner became long drives. Long drives became sitting in his truck outside my apartment, talking until midnight. And somehow, without either of us saying it aloud, Roman became the first person I looked for when something happened in my life. The first person I wanted to tell when I had good news. The first person I wanted when I had a bad day. That should have made me happy. Instead, it scared me. Because every time I looked at Roman, I saw the years between us. 25 years. I saw a man who had already experienced things I hadn't even begun to understand. And I saw myself standing beside him, wondering whether I belonged there. One evening, Roman invited me to his house. I had been there before, but never for long. This time he was cooking dinner. You cook? I asked as I walked into the kitchen. He glanced over his shoulder. I've been surviving on my own for a while. That's not the same thing. He gave me a look. You planning to insult the person feeding you? Just establishing expectations. He laughed. The house felt different from my apartment. Warm. Spacious. Lived in. There were photographs on the walls. Roman younger. Roman in uniform. Roman standing beside a woman who I assumed was his ex-wife. And then, a photograph of Roman with a little girl. I stopped. That's Leah? He turned around. Yeah. How old was she? 6. I stared at the picture. You look so young. Roman smiled. I was. For some reason that hit me harder than it should have. I looked around the room. He had a history here. A real one. Years of memories. Family dinners. Birthdays. Christmas mornings. Arguments. Reconciliations. A whole lifetime. I suddenly felt like someone who had walked into the middle of a movie. I hadn't seen the beginning. And I wasn't sure I belonged in the ending. Roman noticed my silence. You okay? Yeah. He didn't believe me. But he didn't push. Not then. Dinner was wonderful. We talked. We laughed. For a while, I forgot everything. Then the door opened. Roman looked toward the hallway. That's Leah. My stomach tightened. His daughter. She walked into the room carrying a small bag. She was 27. 2 years older than me. Tall, confident, with Roman's eyes. She stopped when she saw me. Roman smiled. Hey. Hey, Dad. Then he looked at me. Eli, this is Leah. I stood. Hi. She smiled politely. Hi. There was a brief silence. Then she glanced between us. Something about her expression made me nervous. She knew. Maybe not everything. But enough. We spent the next hour talking. Leah was warm and funny. She didn't interrogate me. She didn't make things uncomfortable. In fact, she seemed completely normal about me being there. But I wasn't normal. I was hyper-aware of every little thing. The fact that she was only 2 years older than me. The fact that Roman had raised her. The fact that he had once held her as a baby while I was nowhere near his life. When I finally left that night, I couldn't shake the feeling. Roman walked me to my car. You've been quiet. I'm tired. Eli. I looked at him. What? Talk to me. I sighed. I met your daughter. Yes. She's great. She is. She's 27. Roman waited. So? I laughed nervously. So she's closer to my age than yours. His expression changed. Eli. I know how this sounds. Then don't let your fear finish the sentence for you. I looked away. It's weird. What is? I don't want to feel like I'm some kid who wandered into your life. Roman stepped closer. You aren't. You already had a whole life before me. Yes. And what if I don't fit? He was silent for a moment. Then he said, you don't have to fit into my past. I looked at him. You have to fit into my present. The words should have comforted me. Instead, I felt tears threatening my eyes, because part of me desperately wanted to believe him. We hugged that night. Nothing more. Just his arms around me. My forehead against his shoulder. His hand resting gently against the back of my neck. It should have been enough. But my insecurity followed me home. Over the next few days I pulled away. Not completely. Just enough for Roman to notice. My messages became shorter. Our calls became less frequent. Whenever he asked to see me, I had an excuse. Finally he called. Are you avoiding me? I was sitting on my couch. No. Eli. I closed my eyes. Maybe a little. Why? I didn't answer. Did I do something? No. Then tell me. I took a deep breath. I don't know how to be the person you need. The silence on the other end of the phone was painful. You think I need you to be something? I don't know. You keep talking like I'm looking for someone to fill a role. Aren't you? His voice became quieter. What role? The younger guy who makes you feel alive again. He didn't answer. I regretted it immediately. That's not fair, he said. I know. No. You don't. I could hear disappointment in his voice. You think because I'm older, I can't love you without some hidden reason. I didn't say that. You don't have to. The call ended soon after. I barely slept. The following afternoon, Roman came to my apartment. I opened the door and saw him standing there. No uniform. No smile. Just Roman. What are you doing here? I wanted to talk. About what? About us. I looked away. There is no us. He stepped slightly closer. Then why did you hold my hand? I swallowed. Because I wanted to. Why did you let me hold yours? Because I wanted that too. Why did you look at me like you were afraid I was going to disappear? I couldn't answer. Roman sighed. I'm not asking you to ignore the age difference. I can't. I know. I'm 25. I know. You're 50. I've somehow managed to remember that. Despite myself, I laughed. He smiled faintly. Then his expression became serious again. I had a life before you. I know. I loved someone before you. I know. I have a daughter. I have memories. I have mistakes. I have scars. He stepped closer. But none of that makes what I feel for you less real. My eyes burned. What if you wake up one day and realize I'm too young? Then we deal with that day. And if I change? You will. The answer surprised me. Roman continued. So will I. He reached toward me, stopping before touching me. That's what relationships are. Two people changing and deciding whether they still want to stand beside each other. I finally looked at him. I don't know how to stop being afraid. You don't have to. His voice softened. You just have to stop being afraid alone. Something inside me broke. I stepped forward. Roman pulled me into his arms. I buried my face against his chest. His hand moved slowly over my back. Neither of us spoke. We simply stood there. When I finally lifted my head, we were closer than we'd ever been. Our faces were inches apart. I could feel his breath. He looked at me, waiting, giving me every chance to step away. I didn't. I closed the distance just enough for our foreheads to touch. Roman whispered, Eli. Yeah. If we're going to do this. My heart pounded. We do it honestly. I nodded. Okay. He brushed his thumb gently across my cheek. Then he kissed my forehead. Nothing more. But somehow, that simple kiss meant more to me than anything else could have. Because for the first time, I understood what Roman had been trying to tell me. He wasn't asking me to become part of his past. He was asking me to build something new with him. And maybe, just maybe, I was finally ready to stop running from it. After that night, something between Roman and me became easier. Not simple. Not perfect. Just easier. For the first time, I stopped pretending I didn't care about him. And Roman stopped pretending he wasn't afraid of caring about me. We talked more openly. About my insecurities. About his past. About the strange reality of standing on opposite sides of a 25-year gap and somehow feeling as though we had found the same place in the middle. There were still awkward moments. There were still questions I didn't know how to answer. But there was no longer a reason to hide from them. A week after the conversation at my apartment, Roman picked me up after work. I climbed into his truck and found 2 coffees waiting in the cup holders. "You remembered." He glanced at me. "Black coffee. 1 sugar." I smiled. "You remember everything." Occupational hazard. I laughed. We drove without deciding where we were going. That had become one of my favorite things about being with him. With everyone else, silence felt like something that needed to be filled. With Roman, silence simply existed. The city slowly disappeared behind us. Soon we were driving along a quiet road outside town, surrounded by trees and distant hills. I looked out the window. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere. Very specific." He smiled. "You're difficult to surprise. You're old. You're supposed to be mysterious." He looked at me. "Old?" I immediately laughed. "You're 50. And you're 25. "Exactly. So you're the one dating an old man." I turned toward him. "I never said I was dating you." Roman raised an eyebrow. "No. No." He pulled into a quiet overlook and parked. Then he turned off the engine. The sudden silence felt different. He looked at me. "Then what are we doing?" My stomach tightened. I looked down at my hands. "Falling into something." Roman smiled faintly. "That's more honest." I nodded. He reached for my hand. This time there was no hesitation. Our fingers intertwined. I stared at our hands. "Does this ever scare you?" "Every day." I looked at him, surprised. "Really?" He nodded. "I've spent most of my adult life being certain about what I'm supposed to do. And now I don't know." He lifted our joined hands slightly. "That's the part that scares me." I smiled. "What part?" "How much I want this." My chest tightened. I had imagined Roman as the confident one, the older man, the firefighter who could walk into a burning building without fear. But sitting beside me he looked vulnerable. Human. "I want it too," I whispered. Roman looked at me. The silence stretched. Then he leaned slightly closer. He stopped before our faces touched. Waiting. Again. Always waiting. I moved toward him. Our lips met. The kiss was soft at first, almost uncertain. Then I felt his hand gently settle against the side of my face. Something in me loosened. I kissed him again. Longer this time. When we finally separated, neither of us spoke. I rested my forehead against his. Roman smiled. "You're shaking." "So are you." He laughed quietly. "I thought firefighters were supposed to be calm. Only during emergencies." "This isn't an emergency?" His eyes held mine. "Feels like one." I laughed. Then I kissed him again. That became the beginning. Not of something reckless. Of something real. Our relationship moved forward in small steps. Roman kissed me goodbye before work. I started keeping one of his jackets at my apartment. He started leaving his coffee mug there. We held hands when we walked. Sometimes he'd pull me into a long hug for no reason at all. Sometimes I'd sit beside him on the couch with my head against his shoulder while we watched television. There was nothing dramatic about those moments. And somehow they meant everything. One evening we were sitting on his couch after dinner. My head rested against his chest. His fingers moved slowly through my hair. I closed my eyes. "This is dangerous." Roman's hand paused. "What?" "How comfortable this feels." He smiled. "Why is that dangerous?" "Because I'm getting used to you. That's generally how relationships work." I opened my eyes. "Relationship." He looked down at me. "That's what we're doing." I smiled. "So we're official?" I thought the kissing gave that away. I laughed. He leaned down and kissed my forehead. I felt ridiculously happy. Then his expression changed. "What?" "Nothing." "Roman." He sighed. "Work." I sat up. "What happened?" "Nothing happened tonight." "Then why do you look worried?" He hesitated. "There was a bad call yesterday." I waited. He told me about a house fire. He didn't give me every detail. He didn't need to. I could see the exhaustion in his eyes. "You were scared." He looked at me. "Yes." The answer surprised me. "But you went inside anyway." "That's the job." I reached for his hand. "Does it ever get easier?" "No." He squeezed my fingers. "You just learn how to carry it." I moved closer and wrapped my arms around him. He held me tightly. For a while neither of us spoke. His chin rested lightly against my hair. My eyes closed, and something became very clear. I didn't just want Roman when he was smiling. I wanted to be there when he was tired, when he was frightened, when he carried things he couldn't explain. I wanted to know every version of him, just as I wanted him to know every version of me. That night, we stayed on the couch until we both fell asleep. I woke around 4 a.m. The room was dark. Roman was still beside me. I shifted slightly and he woke. "You okay?" "Yeah." "What time is it?" 4. He sighed. "Of course." I smiled. "You always wake up?" "Sometimes." "What do you think about?" He looked at the ceiling. "Everything." I turned toward him. "Tell me." He was quiet for several seconds. Then he said, "I think about whether I'm doing enough." "For what?" "For everyone." I reached for his hand. "You don't have to save everyone." He smiled faintly. "I know." "Do you?" He looked at me. "Learning." I squeezed his fingers. "So am I." He turned toward me. We were close enough that I could feel his breath. He brushed his fingers gently over my cheek. "I don't know what I did to deserve you." I smiled. "You almost burned my apartment down with your personality." He laughed. "My personality? Very dangerous." He kissed me, slowly, tenderly, then pulled me closer. I rested against him and listened to his heartbeat. That night, we stayed close until sleep found us again. There was no need to rush anything. No need to prove anything. We were learning each other. And that was more intimate than anything I'd experienced before. But reality eventually caught up. Roman's schedule became brutal. Long shifts, unexpected calls, late nights. There were days when we'd barely speak. At first I understood. Then I started missing him. One Friday we'd planned dinner. I waited. An hour passed. Then 2. At 10:47 my phone finally rang. "I'm sorry." His voice sounded exhausted. "We got called out." "I know." "I should have called." "I know." Silence. I could feel frustration rising. "I don't want to be the person who waits around for you." Roman exhaled. "I don't want that either." "Then what are we doing?" He didn't answer. I hated myself for asking. Because the truth was I already knew. We were building something around a life that was difficult to predict. And I didn't know whether I was strong enough for it. Roman finally said, "Come over." I hesitated. "Tonight." "Tonight." I drove to his house. When I arrived, he opened the door wearing a plain t-shirt and looking completely exhausted. For a second we just stared at each other. Then Roman stepped forward and pulled me into his arms. No explanations. No arguments. Just warmth. I wrapped my arms around him. His hand rested against my back. "I missed you," he whispered. I closed my eyes. "I missed you too." He kissed the top of my head. "I'm trying." "I know. But I don't want you to feel alone. I don't want you to feel like you have to choose between me and your life." He pulled back. "That's exactly the problem." "What?" "I don't want to choose." His eyes held mine. "I want a life where you are already part of it." My heart stopped. Before I could answer, he kissed me. Not hurried. Not desperate. Just certain. When we separated, I rested my forehead against his. And for the first time I knew what this was. It wasn't a secret. It wasn't an experiment. It wasn't a temporary escape from our different lives. We were choosing each other. And somewhere between the midnight conversations, the quiet kisses, the long embraces, and the moments when we simply fell asleep beside each other, Roman had become home. And I was beginning to wonder whether home was exactly where he wanted me to stay. For a while, everything between Roman and me felt almost easy. Almost. We had fallen into a rhythm. He worked. I worked. We found time for each other whenever we could. Some nights we'd cook dinner together. Other nights we'd order takeout and argue over what to watch. Sometimes we barely spoke at all. I'd sit beside him on the couch with my head against his shoulder while he rested one hand over mine. It was the kind of closeness I'd never known I wanted. Quiet. Ordinary. Safe. But then Roman's work became harder. His shifts seemed to stretch longer. Calls came in the middle of dinner. His phone never stopped buzzing. And every time it did, a small part of me wondered whether he would come home that night. I hated that feeling. I hated even more that I couldn't make it disappear. One evening I was waiting for him when my phone rang. It was Roman. "Eli." I could hear the exhaustion in his voice. "Are you okay?" "Yeah." He paused. "I'm not going to make it tonight." I looked at the dinner I'd prepared. "Another call?" "Yeah." I tried to hide the disappointment in my voice. "Okay. Eli." It's fine. It's not. I sat down. You don't have to apologize for doing your job. But I don't want you always waiting for me. I didn't answer, because that was exactly what I was doing. Waiting. And I didn't know how long I could continue doing it without becoming bitter. The call ended. I sat alone at the table. The food went cold. For the first time, I wondered whether loving Roman meant accepting that I'd always come second to the life he'd built long before me. That thought stayed with me. A few days later, Roman finally asked me to come over. When I arrived, I found him sitting in his living room staring at a cup of coffee he hadn't touched. He looked different. Not physically. Emotionally. Tired. Uncertain. I sat beside him. What's wrong? He looked at me. I got offered a position. Where? The Fire Academy. I stared at him. You'd be teaching? He nodded. Training new firefighters. That's good. It is. But he didn't sound convinced. I waited. Roman finally leaned back. It means leaving active duty. My heart sank. You don't want to? I don't know. He rubbed a hand over his face. I've spent my entire adult life doing this. Responding to calls. Running into buildings. Being the person everyone expects to show up. And now people are telling me it's time to slow down. I looked at him. Do you think they're right? He smiled without humor. Some days. He stared toward the window. I don't know who I am if I'm not the guy everyone calls when things go wrong. I reached for his hand. You'd still be Roman. His eyes came back to mine. Would I? Yes. He shook his head. You make it sound simple. It's not. I moved closer. But you keep thinking that choosing a different life means giving up the old one. He was quiet. Maybe it just means choosing what comes next. Roman looked down at our hands. What comes next? I swallowed. Whatever you want. He didn't answer. I squeezed his fingers. I don't want you to leave firefighting because of me. I know. I don't want you to become someone you're not because you're afraid I'll leave. I know. Then make the decision for yourself. His eyes softened. What if I choose wrong? Then we'll deal with it. He gave me a faint smile. You make everything sound easy. No. I shook my head. I just don't want fear making decisions for us anymore. For several seconds he said nothing. Then he pulled me closer. I rested my head against his shoulder. His arm wrapped around me. We stayed like that. No dramatic declarations. No promises about forever. Just two people sitting together trying to understand what the future might look like. The next week was difficult. Roman had to decide. I told him to take his time. But secretly I was terrified. Because part of me was afraid that if he stayed in active duty, one day he'd get hurt. And another part was afraid that if he left, he might resent me for it. Then one evening Roman called. Can you come over? I drove there immediately. When I arrived he was waiting at the door. What happened? He looked at me. I accepted the position. I stared. At the academy? He nodded. I smiled. Are you sure? I'm sure. Because of me? No. He stepped closer. I did it because I realized something. What? I don't want the rest of my life to be measured only by the emergencies I responded to. His voice became softer. I want there to be a life after the sirens. I felt my chest tighten. And you? He looked directly at me. I want you in it. I couldn't stop the smile that spread across my face. Roman reached up and brushed his thumb gently along my cheek. Then he kissed my forehead. I closed my eyes. You really mean that? I do. The next few months changed everything. Roman started working at the academy. His schedule became more predictable. He came home at reasonable hours. We had actual weekends together. We started doing things we'd never had time for before. Grocery shopping. Morning walks. Lazy breakfast. Long drives without any destination. Sometimes we'd spend entire evenings doing absolutely nothing. And somehow those became my favorite nights. Roman also began introducing me more openly into his world. He'd mention me when talking to friends. He stopped treating our relationship like something that needed explanation. And then Leah invited me to dinner. Just the two of us. I was nervous. She noticed. You look terrified. I laughed. I am. She smiled. My dad really likes you. I really like him. I know. I looked down at my plate. Does the age difference bother you? Leah was quiet for a moment. Then she said, at first I thought it might. My stomach tightened. But then I saw him with you. I looked up. What did you see? My dad. She smiled. Not the firefighter. Not the captain. Not the man everyone depends on. She shrugged. The version of him who laughs more. My eyes filled unexpectedly. Leah continued. He's happier. I smiled. Thank you. She reached across the table. You don't have to thank me. Just don't break his heart. I laughed. I'll try. When I got home that night, Roman was waiting for me. How did it go? Your daughter threatened me. He raised an eyebrow. That sounds like Leah. I smiled. She likes me. I know. You knew. She told me. I leaned against him. You two talk about me? Sometimes. That's terrifying. He laughed. I wrapped my arms around his waist. He rested his cheek against my hair. Come here. He held me tightly. For a moment, everything felt perfect. Then Roman disappeared into the kitchen. I followed him. He opened a drawer. What's that? He turned around with a small object in his hand. A key. He placed it in my palm. I stared at it. What is this? My house. I looked at him. I already have a key. That one's a copy. He smiled. This one is yours. My throat tightened. Roman. You keep staying over. I know. You keep leaving clothes here. I smiled. That's because you steal my closet. You don't have enough clothes to need an entire closet. I laughed. Then he became serious again. I want you here. I looked at the key. He continued. Not as a guest. My heart started pounding. I want you to move in. I couldn't speak. The words I'd been waiting for suddenly frightened me. Moving in. Living together. Building a home. That was no longer dating. That was choosing a future. You don't have to answer tonight, Roman said. I looked up. I know. He nodded. I closed my fingers around the key. Then I stepped closer. I already know my answer. His eyebrows lifted. And? I smiled. Yes. Roman laughed softly. Then he pulled me into his arms. I held him tightly. His hand moved slowly across my back. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was entering a life that already existed. We were creating our own. A life that belonged to both of us. A week later, boxes filled the hallway. My books mixed with his. My coffee mug appeared beside his. My shoes joined his near the front door. And one evening, while we unpacked the last box, I suddenly stopped. Roman noticed. What? I looked around. His house no longer felt like his house. It felt like ours. Nothing. He smiled. You're staring. I was just thinking. About? I looked at him. This is real. Roman walked over. He took my face gently between his hands. It is. Then he kissed me. Slowly. Tenderly. When we separated, I whispered the truth I'd been afraid to say for months. I love you. Roman went still. For 1 second he looked almost stunned. Then his expression softened. I love you too. He pulled me against him. And standing there in the middle of half-open boxes, surrounded by the ordinary mess of a life we were building together, I finally understood something. I hadn't fallen into Roman's life. He had made space for me inside it. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the years between us. I was more afraid of ever having to imagine my life without him. Moving in with Roman didn't suddenly make our lives perfect. It made them real. There was a difference. Before, every time we said goodbye, there was a little uncertainty attached to it. Who would call first? When would we see each other again? Would his schedule change? Would one of us get scared and pull away? Now I woke up beside him. Most mornings the first thing I heard was the alarm on his phone. The second thing I heard was Roman complaining about it. 5 more minutes. I opened one eye. You said that 5 minutes ago. I was negotiating. You lost. He groaned and buried his face in the pillow. I laughed. Captain Hayes, you're late. He lifted his head. Don't call me captain before coffee. You spent 30 years telling people what to do. Which means I deserve coffee before being given orders. I smiled and climbed out of bed. Some mornings I made breakfast. Some mornings Roman did. And some mornings we were both too tired, so breakfast consisted of coffee and whatever we could find in the refrigerator. The small things were what surprised me most. His shoes beside mine near the door. My jacket hanging next to his. 2 toothbrushes in the bathroom. His favorite mug sitting beside mine. My groceries taking up half the refrigerator. A photograph of us appearing on the living room shelf. None of it was dramatic. But every little thing reminded me that I belonged there. Still, sometimes the age difference would sneak back into my thoughts. Usually when I least expected it. One Saturday morning Roman and I went shopping for furniture. We stood in a store looking at a sofa. This one, Roman said. I shook my head. Too old-fashioned. It's comfortable. It's ugly. It's practical. You're 50. And you're 25. Exactly. He stared at me. I smiled. What? You're enjoying this too much. Maybe. He walked away. I followed him, laughing. But later that evening I thought about the conversation. Roman had experienced adulthood in a completely different era. He remembered things I had only seen in old photographs. He had been married. He had raised a daughter. He had worked for decades before I even knew who I was. Sometimes I wondered whether I was asking him to start over. And more importantly, whether he would eventually regret doing it. That night we sat on the back porch. The air was cool. Roman had 2 cups of coffee. I rested my feet against the railing. Can I ask you something? Always. Do you ever regret this? He turned toward me. Us. I nodded. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked out into the dark yard. Then he said, No. Never? I regret things I did before you. I looked at him. But not you. My chest tightened. I worry that you'll wake up one day and think you've wasted time. Roman smiled faintly. Eli. He shifted closer. I'm 50. Do you know what the best thing about being 50 is? What? I know the difference between something that matters and something that doesn't. I smiled. And I matter? He looked directly at me. More than you realize. I lowered my eyes. Roman reached for my hand. Do you know what I was doing at 25? I thought about it. Working? Mostly. Being a firefighter. That too. He smiled. I was terrified I was falling behind everyone else. I looked at him. You? Me? He laughed softly. I thought I was supposed to have everything figured out. Did you? Not even close. He squeezed my hand. So don't think your age makes you less prepared for life. I smiled. You always know what to say. No. He shook his head. I just know what I wish someone had told me. That conversation stayed with me. Because I'd spent months thinking about what Roman had already lived. I hadn't considered how much of his past had been filled with uncertainty too. The more I learned about him, the less intimidating our age difference became. He wasn't a man who had figured everything out. He was simply someone who had lived long enough to know that life rarely turns out the way you expect. And maybe that was why I trusted him. A few weeks later, Roman invited some people from the academy over for dinner. I was nervous. There would be people who had known him for years. People who had worked beside him. People who remembered him before me. Before us. I kept wondering whether they'd judge our relationship. Roman noticed. You okay? I'm fine. You've said that 4 times. Maybe I need a better word. He smiled. You don't have to impress anyone. What if they think I'm too young for you? Then that's their problem. What if they think you're too old for me? Also their problem. I laughed. He stepped closer. You don't owe anyone an explanation. His hand rested briefly against my shoulder. You're here because I want you here. Those words calmed me. The evening went better than I expected. People joked about Roman's stubbornness. Someone told stories about his early years at the department. One of his closest friends said, I've never seen him smile this much. Roman looked embarrassed. I smiled. Then I realized something. No one was treating me like an outsider. They were treating me like part of his life. Later that night, after everyone left, we stood in the kitchen cleaning dishes. Roman handed me a plate. I washed it. He dried it. It was strangely peaceful. You know, I said, this is romantic. Doing dishes? Yes. You have very low standards. I live with you. He laughed. I splashed a little water toward him. He stared at me. Don't start. I smiled. What are you going to do? He stepped closer. I could tickle you. You wouldn't. He raised an eyebrow. Wouldn't I? I ran. He caught me before I reached the living room. I laughed so hard I couldn't breathe. He wrapped his arms around me from behind. Got you. This is unfair. You started it. I barely did anything. You challenged a firefighter. Retired firefighter. Still dangerous. He turned me around. We stood there laughing. Then the laughter faded. His hands rested gently at my waist. I looked into his eyes. There was something incredibly comforting about the way he looked at me. Not like I was young. Not like I was fragile. Like I was his equal. Someone he had chosen. He leaned down and kissed me. It was soft. Familiar. The kind of kiss that didn't ask for anything. When we separated, I rested my forehead against his. I love our life. So do I. Even the dishes? Especially the dishes. I laughed. You have become impossible. You knew what you were getting. Actually, I thought I was getting a serious firefighter. And instead, a stubborn old man. Roman laughed. Keep talking. I love you. Better. I kissed his cheek. He pulled me into another hug. That night we sat together on the couch. I rested against him while he absent-mindedly traced circles over my hand. The room was dark except for the lamp beside us. I didn't feel the need to talk. Neither did he. Eventually I fell asleep there. When I woke sometime after midnight, I was still against him. Roman hadn't moved. You awake? He opened his eyes. Yeah. What time is it? Almost 4. I smiled. Again? Apparently 4 in the morning is our official conversation hour. I laughed quietly. He looked at me. What are you thinking? I hesitated. About the future. That's dangerous. I know. What part? Growing old. His expression softened. You think about that a lot? Sometimes. Why? Because you're already there. He chuckled. That's one way to put it. I smiled. I'm serious. So am I. He took my hand. Eli, you can't love someone and demand guarantees about how the future will feel. I know. We don't know what's going to happen. I know. We could change. That scares me. He nodded. It scares me too. I looked at him. But we can promise something simpler. What? He squeezed my hand. That we'll keep talking. I nodded. That we'll keep choosing each other. My throat tightened. And when things get hard? We don't disappear. When we disagree? We come back. When we're afraid? We say it. I smiled. That's your promise? It's the only one I can honestly make. I leaned closer. Then I'll make the same one. Roman kissed my forehead. We stayed awake for another hour talking about things we'd never discussed before. My childhood. His regrets. His fears. My dreams. What retirement might look like. Where we might travel. What kind of house we would want someday. Whether we should adopt a dog. The conversation wandered everywhere. At one point Roman said, You know what's strange? What? When I met you, I thought you'd just be that guy with the burnt garlic bread. I laughed. That's romantic. It gets better. Go on. I thought I'd rescue you from a kitchen disaster and never see you again. And then? He smiled. Then you walked into that fundraiser. I stared at him. And everything got complicated. In a good way? The best way. I kissed him. Outside the world was silent. Inside everything felt warm. Safe. Ours. Over the next year, our relationship settled into something I had once thought impossible. Not because the age gap disappeared. It never did. Because we stopped treating it like a wall. It became part of our story. Roman still teased me about my music. I still complained about his old-fashioned taste. We still disagreed over where to eat. We still had difficult days. There were nights when one of us needed space. There were mornings when neither of us wanted to get out of bed. But we always came back to each other. That was the part that mattered. Then one evening, everything came full circle. I was cooking dinner. Roman was helping. We were arguing about whether I was using too much seasoning. You always overdo it. You always say everything needs less. Because subtlety matters. You're talking about food, not your personality. He laughed. I turned back toward the oven. A few minutes later, smoke started filling the kitchen. I froze. Roman froze. We looked at each other. Then at the oven. Then back at each other. Don't? I pointed at him. He was already smiling. Eli? No. He laughed. I opened the oven. Burnt garlic bread. Again. For several seconds, neither of us said anything. Then Roman started laughing. I tried not to. I failed. Soon we were both laughing so hard that I had to lean against the counter. After a moment, Roman walked toward me. He took my hand. Some things never change. I looked at him. Apparently. He smiled. But some things do. He glanced around the kitchen. At our mugs. Our photographs. Our shared home. Then back at me. Everything changed. I smiled. That night you rescued me? He shook his head. You rescued yourself. No. I stepped closer. You came through the door. Roman's expression softened. And you stayed. I rested my forehead against his. Yeah. Best decision I ever made. The smoke alarm suddenly started screaming. We both looked up. Then at each other. And burst out laughing again. For a moment I thought about the boy I had been that first night. scared, embarrassed, convinced the firefighter standing at his door would disappear from his life as soon as the smoke cleared. I couldn't have been more wrong. Because Roman hadn't just walked into my apartment. He had walked into my future. And somewhere between the first awkward conversation, the fears, the age gap, the arguments, the kisses, the late-night talks, and the ordinary mornings, we had built something neither of us had expected. A life. Our life. And when Roman wrapped his arms around me that night, with the smoke alarm still screaming above us, I finally understood the truth. The best things in life don't always arrive when you're ready. Sometimes they walk through your door at 2:13 in the morning, and stay forever. 2 years had passed since the night Roman had walked into my apartment because I had nearly burned down my kitchen. 2 years. Sometimes I still couldn't believe it. I was 30 by then, though Roman insisted I was becoming dangerously responsible. He was still 50. Still stubborn. Still incapable of admitting when I was right. And somehow, after everything we'd been through, our relationship felt less like a story and more like a life. Our life. The apartment where I'd once lived alone was gone. Instead, we had a house with a small garden, too many coffee mugs, books stacked in places they didn't belong, and photographs covering the walls. There was one picture in particular that I loved. Roman and me standing in front of the house on moving day. I was holding a box. He was holding another. We both looked exhausted. And incredibly happy. Below it was another photograph. Leah had taken it without telling us. Roman was sitting on the porch, laughing at something I'd said. I was looking at him. Not at the camera. At him. When Leah finally showed me the picture, I'd laughed. You caught me staring. She smiled. I think that's your favorite activity. She wasn't wrong. Even after 2 years, I still caught myself looking at Roman. Sometimes when he was making coffee. Sometimes when he was reading. Sometimes when he walked into a room after a long day at the academy. There was something about him that still made my chest tighten. Maybe it was the familiar gray at his temples. Maybe it was the small lines around his eyes that had become part of his face. Or maybe it was simply because I knew the man behind all of it now. I knew his fears, his habits, his bad jokes, his favorite songs, the expression he made when he was worried, the way he rubbed the back of his neck when he didn't know what to say, the way he'd reach for my hand in his sleep without even waking. Love had changed too. At the beginning it had felt like a storm. Excitement, fear, uncertainty. Every touch felt significant. Every kiss felt dangerous. Every moment apart felt too long. Now love was quieter, but somehow deeper. It was Roman saving me the last piece of toast. It was me charging his phone because he always forgot. It was grocery lists stuck to the refrigerator. It was arguing over whose turn it was to wash the dishes. It was him sending me a message during lunch. Miss you. And me replying. You've been gone 3 hours. His response always came quickly. Long 3 hours. I would smile every time. One Sunday afternoon, Leah came over for dinner. She walked through the front door carrying a dessert. Where do you want this? Kitchen, I called. Roman appeared behind me. What is it? Something you can't burn. I looked at him. She doesn't trust us. She's learned. Leah laughed. Dinner was loud and comfortable. At one point she looked between us. You two know you've become unbearably domestic, right? I frowned. What's wrong with that? Nothing. She smiled. It's just funny. Roman raised an eyebrow. What? She looked at him. I remember when you used to come home from the firehouse and barely talk. Roman shrugged. I was tired. Now. She looked toward me. Now he talks constantly. I laughed. You're welcome. Roman shook his head. I don't know which one of you is more annoying. Definitely Eli, Leah said. Thank you. After dinner, Leah stayed in the kitchen helping me clean. Roman had gone to make coffee. Leah lowered her voice. He's happy. I looked at her. I know. No. She shook her head. I mean really happy. I smiled. He makes me happy too. She leaned against the counter. Then keep doing whatever you're doing. I nodded. I will. She smiled. You know, when Dad first told me about you, I was worried. I remember. I thought maybe it was just temporary. Me too. She laughed softly. But I was wrong. I smiled. You were. She nudged my shoulder. I'm glad. When Leah left that night, Roman and I stood at the door watching her drive away. I leaned against him. She's wonderful. She is. You raised her well. He was quiet. Then he said, I got lucky. I looked up. With Leah? With both of you. I smiled. We went inside. The house was quiet again. Roman took my hand as we walked toward the living room. We sat together on the couch. My head rested against his shoulder. His fingers moved slowly over mine. We didn't say anything for a while. Eventually I spoke. "Do you ever think about that first night?" Roman laughed. "Which part?" "The fire alarm. The garlic bread." I smiled. "Yes." He looked down at me. "I still think you owe me for that." "For what?" "Nearly killing us with carbohydrates." I laughed. "Technically you rescued me. Technically you opened the door. Because you were yelling." I announced myself. "You were terrifying. I was doing my job. And I was having the worst night of my life." He looked at me. "Best night of mine." I lifted my head. "You liked me that night?" "I noticed you." My heart warmed. "When?" "When you tried to make a joke while you were clearly terrified." I smiled. "I was embarrassed." "I know." "And you smiled." "I did." "Why?" Roman shrugged. "Because you were cute." I stared at him. "You thought I was cute?" "I thought you were trouble." "That's not the same thing." "With you it is." I laughed. Then he gently pulled me closer. I rested my head against his chest. His heartbeat was steady beneath my ear. For a moment, memories rushed through me. The coffee shop. The first time we held hands. The first kiss. The argument. The night he gave me his key. Moving in. The fire academy. Our first Christmas together. Every difficult conversation. Every ordinary morning. All of it. I realized something then. I'd once thought the age difference was the biggest part of our story. It wasn't. It was only the detail everyone noticed first. What mattered was everything beneath it. We were two people who had lived completely different lives. And somehow we'd learned how to meet in the middle. Roman had his history. I had mine. Neither of us needed to erase the other person's past. We simply had to stop treating it like a competition. At 25, I had thought I needed someone who would understand every part of my life because they'd lived the same number of years. Instead, I found someone who didn't share my history at all, but wanted to hear every chapter of it. And Roman, who had spent decades being the person everyone depended on, had finally allowed someone to depend on him emotionally too. That someone was me. "You got quiet," he said. "I'm thinking." "About what?" "About us." His arm tightened around me. "That's dangerous." I smiled. "Remember when we thought we wouldn't work? Sometimes I still think we're insane." "We probably are." He kissed the top of my head. "Probably." I turned toward him. "Would you do it again?" He looked at me. "What?" "That night." His expression softened. "The kitchen?" "Everything." Roman didn't hesitate. "Yes." Even now, after everything, the certainty in his voice made my heart race. I touched his cheek. He held my hand there. "I'd do it differently." "How?" "I'd take the garlic bread away from you sooner." I laughed. "That's not romantic." "I'm a firefighter, not a poet." "You've been saying that for 2 years." "Still true." I kissed him. A soft, familiar kiss. The kind that came from knowing someone deeply. When we separated, Roman rested his forehead against mine. "Stay." I smiled. "I live here." "I know." He kissed my forehead. "I just like hearing you say it." I wrapped my arms around him. "I'm not going anywhere." Neither of us knew what the future would look like. We didn't know how many years we'd have. We couldn't predict every difficult moment ahead. But we'd learned something more valuable than certainty. We learned how to stay, how to listen, how to apologize, how to reach for each other after an argument instead of walking away, how to let love change without letting it disappear. Later that night, I went into the kitchen to make us something to eat. Roman followed. "I'll help." "You'll ruin it." "I have improved." "You set water on fire once." "That happened one time." I opened the refrigerator. He opened the oven. Then I smelled it. Smoke. I froze. Roman froze too. Slowly we looked at each other. "Don't say it," I whispered. He glanced into the oven. Then looked back at me. "Garlic bread." I burst out laughing. He laughed too. Within seconds, the kitchen filled with smoke again. The alarm started screaming. I opened the windows. Roman waved a towel under the detector. We were both laughing so hard we could barely breathe. Eventually the alarm stopped. The smoke cleared. Roman leaned against the counter, still smiling. I looked around the kitchen. The same smell. The same ridiculous disaster. But everything else had changed. 2 years ago, smoke had meant fear. That night it meant laughter. I walked toward Roman. He opened his arms. I stepped into them. He held me tightly. I rested my cheek against his chest. Do you remember what you told me that first night? That you'd survive? I laughed. No. You told me my apartment was going to survive. It did. And you told me not to burn dinner. You ignored me. I did. He smiled. But you stayed. I closed my eyes. Yeah. His arms tightened. So did you. Roman kissed my forehead. And standing there in our smoky kitchen, surrounded by everything we'd built, I finally understood what our story had really been about. It hadn't been about an age gap. It hadn't been about a firefighter rescuing a younger man. It hadn't even been about two people who never expected to fall in love. It had been about finding someone who saw all the reasons a relationship might fail, and chose to stay anyway. Roman had entered my life through a door at 2:13 in the morning. I had expected him to leave when the smoke cleared. Instead, he stayed long enough to become my best friend, then my lover, then my partner, then my home. And after everything we'd survived, I knew one thing for certain. The best part of our love story wasn't how it began. It was that, after all the fear, all the doubts, all the years between us, we were still choosing each other. Every morning, every night, every ordinary day in between. And when Roman took my hand and pulled me toward the kitchen table, laughing about our ruined dinner, I smiled because I finally understood something I hadn't known at 25. Forever doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives quietly. Sometimes it looks like a spare key, a coffee mug beside yours, a hand reaching for yours at 4 in the morning, a man waiting for you at the end of a long day. And sometimes, it looks like smoke filling the kitchen again, while the person you love is standing beside you, laughing. And this time, the smoke alarm doesn't sound like a warning. It sounds like home.